Yes, that is the truth. And so right now, just taking in that breath and recognizing that life. For there is only one life, and I acknowledge that life. I call that life God. It has many names. And that life is good. It is giving, supporting, and it is creating eternally. And because that life is all there is, I recognize that life within me. It is a flow. It is happening. And it is this God, this life, this power that is living me, as me, through me. And because I am made in its image, a likeness, I have a consciousness, and that consciousness of mine has thoughts, and those thoughts create because God creates. And that power of creation is within me. And as I open and use my consciousness, I am lifted by that flow and that power to create. And I know that there are times where my doubts, my fears, my confusion disconnects and stops that flow. I forget that that power is always existing within me, through me, living me. And so I open, today I open, for I know that that power and that life is with everything, in everyone. And as I release and open, trusting that I am always supported, I am always lifted like a feather in the wind, carried in the flow, always. And I know and believe and trust that my good is always being lifted and brought to me. For that is the consciousness of spirit, all good, all the time, for me, for life. And for this truth I give great thanks. For I am never alone, I am always supported, I am loved by life. And I know that that love is unending. That love permeates all things and all people. And this power is available to all. This life is for all. And I'm so grateful for the love, the beauty of this world, and how this love is shared, and the gifts are given and received. And so I release this truth into that action of the law, that part of God that creates it, makes it right here and now. And so I claim this, and together I simply say, and so it is. And now we'll have 2 minutes of silent reflection.
Praise be to God, naked being who wears this universe as its body and whose name is I. Praise be to God, for whom the world is its song and silence its prayer. That's an excerpt from an invocation by a wonderful British spiritual teacher named Rupert Spira. And if you're new here, you've probably figured out that from that song and from Susan's opening prayer that God isn't the God that you probably grew up with. You know, little confined, guy. So we're here to look at that. We're here This whole year, we're celebrating living out loud. The idea of living out loud. Mark Nepo, in his book, The Book of Awakening, says, live loud enough in your heart, and there is no need to speak. So living out loud isn't making a whole bunch of noise and racket, but living our authenticity fully. What we just heard Amy do was sing from that authenticity fully. And when we live that way, it inspires. It frees us and inspires others. And so today's talk is the universal voice. Last week we talked about what Ernest Holmes calls the thing itself. Its nature of life, of love, of light, of power, of peace, of beauty, of joy. In the first 4 chapters of the Introduction to the Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes labels these 4 chapters the thing itself, the way it works, what it does, and how to use it. Notice that the first 3 are about the thing itself. Only in the 4th do we get to, and we as humans, how to use it. So our grounding, our power, our place where we stand is in learning and knowing it. Learning and knowing this divine infinite presence. When we do that, we learn that within it, all is well. Within it, as we contemplate it, as we recognize our oneness within it, all is well, which doesn't mean that all is in alignment with my small idea of how it should be, okay? Because sometimes it doesn't, on our human level, necessarily feel well, but we've all been through stuff that didn't feel good when we went through it, but later on we can look back and say, oh, but that was for the best, I'm a better person, I've had a better life for having gone through that which didn't feel well at the time. That's the wellness we're talking about, the long term, the infinite wellness. If we pay attention and expand and lengthen and broaden our view, the infinite presence is always for us because we are one of it, and it's always for itself. It can't be against itself or it wouldn't exist anymore. So the universe, first time I heard this, I wanted to puke, to be perfectly honest. But the universe is for us. Because back then I was in such disagreement with that idea. But today I know that the universe is for us. It isn't always what I want it to be or how I like it to be, but it is for us. In the 2nd chapter, Ernest Holmes says, the realization that good is universal, that's a capital G, good, is universal, and that as much good as any individual is able to incorporate in their life is theirs to use, is what constitutes the science of mind and spirit. So that's it. I know you all completely got that. You completely understand it. You can now apply it deeply in all aspects of your life. So we're done. The realization that good is universal, everywhere, always present, and that as much good as any individual is able to incorporate in their life is theirs to use. Oh, I might have some work to do to expand how much I can incorporate into my life. This good of which he speaks isn't my or your idea, which, because we are finite beings contemplating an infinite beingness, are always too small, too limited. However, we do have the ability to expand. We talk about expanding our consciousness. How much good can you perceive? How much good can you open to? That much is yours. Our idea of good, which expands us into greater experience. We have the ability to expand into that greater experience of that already existing good. Got that? This good, whatever good you want, already exists. I was talking with a friend recently who wanted something in their life, and I said, it already exists. You may not have discovered it yet, but it's already there. This good is always expanding its expression of itself. So the infinite is changeless, but always expressing more of itself, which is the changing, which makes life fun and interesting, yes? We don't want it to be the same, boring, every day, over and over again. Some of us have experienced life like that. Thrice Great Hermes says, "Then in this way know God, as having all things in himself as thoughts, the whole cosmos itself." You and I are thoughts in the mind of the infinite. I always like to say to people, if God didn't need you, it wouldn't be taking the time, energy, and thought to be you, right? So guess what? Nudge your neighbor and said, "You're supposed to be here." By here, I mean on this planet, in this life. The infinite presence is taking the time to be you. And it finds conscious and individualized centers of expression through us. Our intelligence, our mind, is this universal mind functioning at the level of our concept of it. Our mind, our intelligence, is really how much we're using of this infinite mind based on our concept of it. Our ability to more clearly perceive and conceive it. Whatever good we can perceive, we are allowing to be conceived and then birthed through us. Last week we did a visioning following this session, and at the retreat that we're involved in the middle of right now, we did that visioning question, and that question was, what is Spirit's highest idea? What is it that wants to be birthed through me? That's a powerful question to always be sitting in, moment by moment. What is it that wants to be birthed through me now for my highest good? This is the essence of the whole teaching. An infinite presence of good, of love, of life, of intelligence, unopposed by anything else. There's no something else out there. Simply expressing its own nature, and at least on this planet, expressing itself through individual points of consciousness, us, all of us, to the degree that we can open to it. And so that's our work, our process, if you will, is to open more fully. How much good can I conceive? How much good can I handle? The universe simply says yes. And we expand our thinking beyond being clods of earth to knowing this truth. Our greater knowing of that truth, of that experience. This is why Jesus says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God." As we expand, it will result in our greater experience of good. Our consciousness is creative. Our opening is creative. Not because we do something, but because we open to that which is already flowing and allowing it to show up in our lives. And yes, we can shape it by our choices. But it's still the one power, finding all sorts of an infinite variety of ways to show up. So the hearing of the infinite song being sung throughout the universe and within us, the finding of this place within us, which already is the kingdom of heaven. You want to go to heaven? Guess what? We're already here. And then we already and always are the sons and daughters of the Most High, already living in the city of God, and we are the city of God. As we awaken to and expand our awareness of this truth, our day-to-day problems shrink to a no-thingness. Just like the problems of the caterpillar become nothing to the butterfly. As we transform, as we expand, that which we were living in trouble with yesterday is no longer a problem. In the first movie in the Matrix series, there comes a point where the main character, Neo, knows himself, realizes that he is the one. And he shakes off the dust of the past, all the dust of all the past experience, faces his problems with a calm confidence and knowing. And his problems literally dissolve before him. when we know who we are, when we get that lovely phrase that don't tell God how big your problems are, tell your problems how big your God is, and then recognize that you are that. I like to use the example of sometimes our problems feel like Mount Rainier, right? Something that big. But if you take a plane and go up to 40,000 feet, Mount Rainier is not that big. If you get up to the space station, it's not real present. If you're orbiting somewhere out around the outer edges of the solar system, you don't even see Mount Rainier. As we raise and expand our view, our problems become irrelevant, insignificant. And this is not some airy-fairy, navel-gazing fantasy, okay? We're not a teaching that's about an empty-headed sort of just happy, magical thinking. That's not who we are. That's not what we are. This is a practical, down-to-earth, apply it here and now in human form teaching. A clear-headed examination of how to live fully, out loud, to really live, not just exist in this very real world. This is why Jesus says, I have overcome the world. And he's not saying just him. He's saying, I'm an example. I'm a way shower. This can be done. I've done it. Let me show you how. Follow that. We're not usually much of a Jesus church, but I happen to be in a Jesus mood that when I was writing this talk. Those who know me know I'll quote the Tao, the Buddha, and just darn near anything. This is why it's called the science of mind. And the mind that this is the science of is the infinite mind, expressing through our individualized minds. This isn't a you or me, my mind and your mind. There's only one mind. And we have the freedom to create our own bondage or freedom by our use of this one mind. And most people on this planet are conditioned to create more bondage, more suffering. Just look around. Why we're here is to free ourselves from those old patterns, those old belief systems. So we can, by our individualized and collective use of mind, create something fresh and something new. So how will you use it? There's a passage in Philippians which says of Jesus, the Christ, which is to say the human, Jesus, in Christ consciousness, which is not limited to him, but is a consciousness, just like the Buddha was the Buddha consciousness, the Buddhahood, the Buddha mind. It wasn't Siddhartha Gautama. And so it says of him, who being in the form or the essence of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God. This is a powerful statement. And although some people like to make this all about Jesus the person, it's actually a very esoteric Gnostic statement of his awareness of his oneness with the divine that is present for all of us. As we recognize that we are one with God, we know it is not robbery, it is not blasphemy, it is not anything else to be like God. The passage then continues, but made himself of no reputation and took the form of a servant. So our awareness of our oneness with the one isn't something for our egos to parade around. Hey, look at me, I'm God. It's not that. Rather, it is for us to not try to be anything special, but to live in the service of the one. To live as servants of the one. Whenever I write my talks, the first thing I do is sit down and say, what do you want to say through me today? This isn't, oh, look at me, I'm David, I'm so cool. This is, what does God want to say? And I'm just a voice that delivers it. Ernest Holmes says, I'm not science of mind. I didn't discover anything, I just put some stuff together. And I was the right person at the right place at the right time. He recognizes his both significance and insignificance at the same time. And that is the truth of each of us. Can we be servants to the one? To the inspiration of the divine, which comes through close living with it with humility, which is, I'm going to get my bloated ego out of the way and listen to it. To be aware that we live, we move, we have our being within this oneness And not due to the actions of our ego, small self, which thinks it's so important. Well, mine does. I don't know about yours. There is this divine power, but it becomes power to us only when we recognize it as power. I of myself can do nothing. It's the Father within that does the work. However, this does not mean we're just mindless clods, right? We're not just little clams laying in the bottom of the ocean, just accepting whatever drops in. That's not what it's saying. No, we are points of consciousness, points of choice within the oneness. This oneness evolved us to be conscious participants, players in this idea of creating the universe that we exist in. To be conscious, ideally, co-creators of this experience of life. Possessing the ability to invoke the law, which is the creative medium of spirit in action. In other words, we choose and the universal substance corresponds. Or the simple version is the universe says yes to whatever we're putting into it. Always. Our thought, our will, our purpose, and our belief creates a tendency in this law that causes it to react to us in accordance to our belief. Breathe that in. It is done unto us as we believe. So the law is always working. This law of creative potential, this creative process is always happening. Ignorance of it excuses no one from the results of it. Again, we can create bondage, we can create freedom through our use, conscious or otherwise. And most of us, and I don't necessarily mean everybody here, but I mean most of us on the planet, use it unconsciously. Repeatedly. We've kind of accepted certain basic beliefs, and we just keep on repeating those beliefs and never step back and go, is that really true? In the fertile soil of mind, what seeds are we planting? Are we planting seeds that are life-enhancing, that are freeing, that are life-affirming, or otherwise? You know, that's why we have this intentions retreat happening right now at this center. This weekend to create conscious tendencies in thought for our lives this year. To get conscious about that. To activate the law consciously and to identify and release tendencies towards limitation and separation from the good that is already and always ours. One of my favorite phrases from Ernest is, principle is not bound by precedent. So just because you were bound yesterday, you can have a moment of freedom. Zen Buddhists are really into this. A moment of freedom, a moment of enlightenment, a moment of life-changing experience and shift. And as you shift, everything shifts. How much good can one demonstrate? Ernest asked this question. And answers just what one can believe. How much good can you believe in for yourself, for the planet, for this center? However much we can see, accept, and find in our own consciousness, and he says that, and I love this, that is no longer repudiated by our own denials. Yesterday, as we were doing the intentions retreat, we had a couple of people who were concentrating on their highest and greatest good, and all of a sudden somebody said, and I heard this little voice go, I don't wanna. You know, we have that, right? You have that voice. You all have heard it. You know? We have that voice that says, oh, I shouldn't ask for money, it's not spiritual. I should be happy with what I have. I had an uncle who used to say, it's better than a kick in the head by a Missouri mule. Just settle for what you got. But that's not the nature of an ever-expanding universe, is it? Is it? No. And since we're part of that, we are ever-expanding beings in this ever-expanding universe. So, however much we can see, accept, and find in our own consciousness that is no longer repudiated by our own denials, whatever that is, that much we can have. If we listen, we can hear the repudiations as they come up. Usually whenever we go for something, it's a little stretch for more good. For something we really want. Love, wealth, money, creativity, whatever it is. And here's the trick. We don't have to battle the repudiations. Oh, I'm going to go spend years digging through my dirt and find out how did that get there and then just do battle with it and get it out of there. No, turn up the light. Repudiations are just darkness. Concentrate on the good, concentrate on the truth more. And that light just turns on and doesn't do battle with the darkness, because darkness is simply the absence of light. Our repudiations are simply the absence of truth. And so as we sit there and focus on the truth and say, no, I'm going to let this expand and brighten up my mind, we don't have to struggle with it. It just happens. We simply turn up the light of truth that we are God, good, in form, and walk in the city of God now. We listen to the universal song that's being sung and not old ghosts and superstitions from the past. So this week, 2 spiritual practices. Number 1, turn up your God light. Spend time contemplating that. Listen to and remember truth, capital T truth. You are one of the one. As one of my teachers used to say, if it ain't true of God, it ain't true of you. And the reverse of that is also true. If it's true of God, it's true of you. Does God live in bondage? No. Does God live in lack and limitation? No. So neither is that the truth of you. And the second practice is, we started it last week, continue contemplating the aspects of God, that life, love, light, power, peace, beauty, and joy, that is the nature of the divine. Continue contemplating the aspects of God you want in your life. Plant seeds of good, life-affirming thoughts. That's our 2 practices. Are you good with that this week? Yeah. Maybe this month, maybe this year, maybe the rest of your life? Yes. I'm going to close with a quote from Ernest, and then we're going to do the fullness of that invocation. So hold just a second here. These guys are always so good. They're trained to, as soon as I say our closing quote, they're going to go for the instruments. And sometimes the closing quote is 1 sentence, and that's a great thing to have, but sometimes it's a little longer. So you might as well rest. Ernest says, let us realize and work with this sound knowledge and perfect faith, that as high as we shall make our mark in mind and spirit, so high shall be its outward manifestation in our material world. As high as we make our consciousness, that is how high we will see it manifesting. Many of you know that one of my favorite old Zen sayings, when you reach the top of the mountain, keep climbing. Keep climbing. However high you can go, you're playing in an infinite presence. You're playing in an infinite good. There's no lack in it. Keep climbing. All we're doing is just expanding and expanding and expanding. How much good can I truly believe in and embody? I want to close then with this invocation from Rupert Spirit in its fullness. Praise be to God, naked being, who wears this universe as its body and whose name is I. Praise be to God, the emness of all selves, although there are no selves. The isness of all things, although there are no things. Praise be to God, who conceals himself in existence and reveals himself as being. Praise be to God, who shrouds herself in time and proclaims herself in eternity. Praise be to God, whose movement is our longing and whose rest is peace itself. Praise be to God, for whom the world is its song and silence its prayer. And we have an affirmation. And if you'll say this with me, I harmonize with the divine song singing through and as me. One more time, I harmonize with the divine song singing through and as me. And so it is. Thank you. Look at the faces of God. Look at the faces of God. Remember that yours is one of those faces. By the way, if we continue to expand, we'll go to 2 services.
Oh, good.
I'll have to work twice as hard. Oh my God.
Oh, no.
Oh no. Anyways,
Twice
feel
as
the
good.
love. Connect your hearts with each other. Feel that love. Almost as if there's, or perhaps even imagining or being aware that there are golden strings going from heart to heart to heart to heart in this room. And feel it. And know with me that there's one infinite presence. By whatever name we call it, there's only one. It is love, and it is life, and it is dang good. And then more. And we are one of it. Always have been, always will be, are right this second one of this infinite presence. Living in our individual way of this presence. Expressing that presence in the unique way of each of us. We're not here to be somebody else. We're here to be ourselves. And so we allow that authenticity, we allow that real self of ourselves to shine, to live out loud. Today, tomorrow, and throughout our lives. And we expand just how big we are. And so it is.
And so it is.